There are countless caves scattered across Skyrim, each one promising danger, treasure, or at the very least, something worth finding. Most of them feel connected to the world in some way. Bandits passing through, creatures making nests, or quests that pull you in with purpose. Even in the most remote corners of the map, there's usually a sense that someone, at some point, has been there before you. But every so often, you come across a place that feels different. Not just empty, but removed. Ljungvild is one of those places. Located far off the northern coast, separated from the mainland and surrounded by cold, unforgiving waters. It already feels distant before you even step inside. There's no natural reason to be there, no obvious path that leads you towards it. You have to choose to go, to deliberately seek it out. And that choice makes what you find feel even more isolating. Because this cave doesn't just feel abandoned, it feels cut off from the world, from the people, from anything that resembles normal life in Skyrim. And as you move deeper into it, that isolation only grows stronger, turning what could have been just another cave into something far more unsettling. Some locations in Skyrim feel remote, others feel empty, but Ljungvild manages to feel completely cut off in a way that few places do in the game. And what makes it stand out isn't just where it is, but how it feels to be there. Sitting far off the northern coast, separated from the mainland by a stretch of cold, unwelcoming sea, just reaching this cave already creates a sense of distance. You're not stumbling across it on the way to something else. You're not following a road that naturally leads you there. You have to go out of your way, deliberately pushing yourself towards the edge of the map, until Skyrim itself starts to feel like it's falling behind you. And once you arrive, that feeling doesn't go away, it deepens. The cave's exterior is quiet in a way that feels unnatural. There's no sense of activity around it, no signs of life trying to reclaim the area, no travellers passing through, even by Skyrim standards where danger often keeps people away. Ljungvild feels like a place that has been completely removed from any kind of regular movement. It's not just avoided, it's forgotten. And that absence sets the tone before you even step inside. Because once you do step inside, the isolation becomes something heavier. Ljungvild doesn't feel like a cave that connects to anything else. There's no sense of overlap with the outside world, no reminders of the land you just came from. Instead, it feels sealed off, it basically is, like it's its own self-contained space that exists independently from the rest of Skyrim. The deeper you go, the more that disconnect becomes noticeable. There are no moments where the outside leaks back in, no distant sounds of weather, no glimpses of light that reminds you of the surface. Just enclosed, quiet spaces that feel increasingly detached from anything else. And it's that silence that really defines that experience. Most caves in Skyrim have some kind of background presence, whether it's the sound of enemies moving, creatures lurking, or even environmental noises that fill the space. There's usually something reminding you that you're not entirely alone, but Ljungvild feels stripped back. The silence isn't just the absence of sound, it feels deliberate, like the cave is actively holding onto it. Every step you take feels more noticeable. Every movement feels like it carries further than it should. It creates this constant awareness that there's nothing else around to break that silence. No one coming in after you, no one waiting outside, no connection back to the world you left behind. And because of that, the cave starts to feel less like a location and more like a space you've been placed into. The layout adds to this feeling in a subtle but important way. Ljungvild doesn't open up in ways that make you feel free to explore. It guides you, narrows you, keeps you moving forward without offering much sense of escape. You're not wandering through it so much as being led through it. And while that might seem like a small detail, it reinforces the idea that once you're inside, you're committed. There's no easy way to mentally step back and reorientate yourself. You just keep going, further in and further away. And the more distance you create between yourself and the entrance, the more that original sense of isolation starts to settle in. Because at a certain point, turning back doesn't feel like returning to safety. It just feels like retracing steps through the same emptiness. Another thing that makes Jungvild stand out is how little it tries to draw attention to itself. There's no dramatic set piece at the entrance other than a few large boulders and ruins. No immediate threat that defines it. It doesn't demand your focus in the way other caves do. Instead, it quietly lets you walk into it. And only after you've spent time inside does the atmosphere start to take hold. It's a slow realization that you're alone, that nothing is interrupting that, and that nothing is coming to change it. Even the scale of the cave plays into this. It's not overwhelmingly large, but it doesn't feel small either. It sits in the middle ground where it's big enough to lose your sense of immediate surroundings, but contained enough that you're constantly aware of being enclosed. That balance creates a kind of pressure, not intense but persistent. Like the cave is holding you in place rather than letting you move freely through it. And because there's no external reference point, no windows, no openings, no shifts in the environment, you lose track of where you are in relation to everything else. You're not just underground, you're somewhere else. And that's what really defines Jungvild's isolation. It's not just about distance from cities or roads, it's about the complete lack of connection to anything outside of it. Once you're in, Skyrim as a whole starts to feel irrelevant. The wars, the factions, the people, all of it fades into the background, replaced by this quiet, enclosed space that doesn't acknowledge any of it. And when a location in a game makes you forget the world it's a part of, that's when it starts to feel truly isolated. Jungvild doesn't rely on constant danger or overwhelming scale to create that feeling. It does it through absence, through silence, through the steady removal of anything familiar or grounding. It takes the idea of a cave, something already separated from the surface, and pushes it just a bit further until that separation becomes complete. And by the time you leave, stepping back out into the open air, it doesn't just feel like you've exited a cave. It feels like you've returned from somewhere that wasn't fully connected to Skyrim at all. What truly transforms Jungvild from simply isolated into something far more disturbing is the story buried within it. A story that doesn't just explain the cave, but actively reinforces why it feels so separate from the rest of Skyrim. At the center of it all is Arundel, a necromancer whose presence lingers long after you begin to understand what he was doing there. And unlike many figures in Skyrim who pursue power, knowledge, or even survival through dark means, Arundel's motivations feel far more personal and far more unsettling. Because Jungvild wasn't just a place he studied in, it was a place he chose. A remote island cut off from everything where no one would interrupt him. That isolation you feel as a player, that wasn't accidental, it was intentional. Arundel needed distance, not just from the people, but from consequence. And what he used that distance for is what defines the cave's entire identity. Throughout Jungvild, you encounter the ghosts of women, restless, lingering, unable to move on. At first, they seem like any other spectral enemy, another hazard in a ruin filled with the undead. But the more you explore, the more it becomes clear that these aren't just random spirits tied to the location. They are his, victims bound to the cave through his necromantic practices, their existence twisted into something that exists purely because of his obsession. And what makes this even more disturbing is how controlled it all feels. These spirits aren't chaotic or accidental. They are part of something deliberate, maintained, preserved. Arundel didn't just stumble into necromancy, he refined it. Journals scattered throughout the cave gives insight into his thoughts. And this is where things take a darker turn. Because instead of the usual pursuit of power or forbidden knowledge, his writings reveal something far more personal. He speaks about these spirits not as tools, not as experiments, but with a kind of fixation that feels deeply uncomfortable. There's a possessiveness to it, an attachment that goes beyond simple control. He isn't just raising the dead, he's keeping them. And that's where the horror of Jungvild really starts to settle in. Because the isolation of the cave begins to make sense in a new way. It's not just that Arundel wanted privacy, it's that he needed a place where no one would see what he was doing, where no one would question the presence of these spirits, or the way he interacted with them. The cave becomes less of a hideout and more of a sealed environment, a space where his actions could exist without interference, a place where nothing would challenge him. And that turns Jungvild into something much more disturbing than a typical necromancer's lair. It becomes a contained world, one where the normal rules don't apply, where the dead are not allowed to rest, not because of some grand ritual or cosmic force, but because one person decided they shouldn't. And the longer you spend in the cave, the more that idea starts to feel suffocating. These ghosts aren't just enemies, they're remnants of something that was never meant to continue. And yet they do, because Arundel made sure of it. When you finally encounter him, there's no grand reveal, no moment of dramatic realization. He's simply there, another figure in the depths of the cave, continuing his work as if it's completely normal. And that lack of spectacle is what makes it hit harder. There's no attempt to justify what he's done in a way that feels redeemable. No complex ideology or external pressure driving him. Just obsession. Quiet, controlled, and fully realized. And when he's gone, when the immediate threat is removed, the cave doesn't suddenly feel resolved. The ghosts remain until you kill them. The atmosphere doesn't shift. The sense of isolation does not lift. Because what happened in Jungvild isn't something that can be undone by a single action. The damage is already built into the place itself. That's what makes the lore of Jungvild so effective. It doesn't just add context. It amplifies everything you've already felt while exploring it. The silence becomes heavier. The separation from the outside world feels more deliberate. The emptiness starts to feel less like absence and more like the result of something that pushed everything else away. And at the center of it all is Arundel. Not a conqueror, not a world-ending threat, but someone who took advantage of isolation in the very worst possible way. In a game filled with massive conflicts and powerful figures, Jungvild stands out because of how small its story feels, and how personal that smallness makes it. There's no larger goal here, no impact on Skyrim as a whole, just a single place, a single person, and the lasting presence of something that should have never been allowed to exist, which in a strange way makes Jungvild feel even more isolated than before. What makes Jungvild stand apart from nearly every other cave in Skyrim isn't just its location or its atmosphere, it's how completely it separates itself from the patterns that define almost every other place in the game. Most caves, no matter how remote, still feel like they belong to Skyrim. They're literally within the main map. They connect to something, a nearby road, a passing faction, a quest line, or even just the natural flow of movement across the map. There's usually a sense that if you hadn't gone there, someone else eventually would have. That these places exist within the world, not just outside of it. Jungvild doesn't follow that rule. It feels like a place that exists beyond Skyrim's usual structure. Take something like Embershard Mine or Bleak Falls Barrow. Early locations that are technically isolated, yet constantly feel connected. Embershard sits just off a road, practically inviting discovery. Bleak Falls Barrow looms over Riverwood, visible from a distance, pulling you toward it through both sight and story. Even deeper, more hidden locations like Blackreach or Labyrinthian are tied into major quest lines or larger pieces of lore that anchor them firmly within the world. They may feel distant, but they are never disconnected. Jungvild is. There's no natural pull toward it, no quest that organically guides you there in the same way other locations do. You don't pass by it on the way to somewhere else. You don't see it looming in the distance, sparking curiosity. Instead, it sits far off the northern coast, almost deliberately placed where it won't be noticed. You have to choose to go there, and even that choice often feels random, like you've stumbled onto something that was never meant to be found in the first place. And that already puts it in a different category, but it goes further than that. Even when you compare Jungvild to other remote or forgotten locations, places like Frostflow Lighthouse or Kenstag Ruins, it feels more cut off. These locations, while isolated, still tell stories that connect back to the world in clear ways. Frostflow Lighthouse, for example, is tragic, but it's grounded. It's a family, a home, something familiar that was disrupted. You understand how it fits into Skyrim's broader reality. However, Jungvild doesn't offer that same grounding. It feels removed not just physically, but conceptually as well. The moment you step inside, it doesn't feel like you're exploring part of Skyrim anymore. It feels like you've stepped into something self-contained. Other caves often remind you of the outside world in subtle ways. You hear weather faintly through openings. You see light filtering in. You encounter enemies that feel like they came from somewhere else. There's always a thread connecting you back. Jungvild cuts that thread almost immediately. There's no sense of the outside bleeding in. No reminder that there's a world continuing beyond its walls. And compared to other caves, that absence becomes incredibly noticeable. Even the most dangerous or chaotic places in Skyrim, Falmer dens, Dwemer ruins, vampire lairs, still feel like part of a larger system. They exist because of something. Jungvild feels like it exists in isolation for the sake of isolation. And that changes how you experience it. In most caves and places in Skyrim for that matter, there's a rhythm. You enter, you fight, you explore, you leave. There's a familiarity to that loop, even places that are meant to feel unsettling. But Jungvild, which still has those kind of elements, disrupts that rhythm by stripping away the sense of progression tied to the outside world. You're not there to clear a path, uncover a major piece of history, or push forward a larger narrative. You're just there. And the longer you stay, the more that lack of connection starts to stand out. Because there's no external reason for anything happening inside to matter beyond the cave itself, other than the fact that Arundel was pushed away from Dawnstar. It doesn't ripple outward nonetheless. It doesn't tie back into a faction or a larger conflict. It stays contained. That containment is what really separates it from other locations. Even places designed to feel empty or abandoned, like Clam Digger's Camp or Refugees' Rest, still feel like they were once part of something bigger. There's a before and an after, a sense of time passing through them. But Jungvild feels frozen in a way that ignores that flow entirely. It doesn't feel like it was left behind. It feels like it was set apart, like it was never meant to be part of the world to begin with. And when you compare it to somewhere like Blackreach, the contrast becomes even clearer. Blackreach is hidden, massive, and deeply isolated in its own right. But it feels alive. It's connected to multiple entrances, multiple systems, and multiple stories. It's hidden, but it's integrated. Jungvild is hidden. And completely alone. No overlapping paths, no sense of shared space, no reason for anyone else to ever be there. And that final point might be what makes it feel the most isolated of all. Because Skyrim, even in the most dangerous places, feel like they could be stumbled upon by someone else. Another adventurer, a faction, a traveller who got lost. But Jungvild feels like a place that only exists when you were there. Like it disappears the moment you leave, returning to a kind of silence that no one else ever interrupts. It's not just that it's far away, it's that it feels unreachable in a way nothing else does. And when you start comparing it to everything else Skyrim offers, it becomes clear that Jungvild isn't just another cave. It's the closest the game gets to a place that feels completely and intentionally alone. Jungvild stands apart from every other cave in Skyrim for one simple reason. It doesn't feel like it belongs. From the moment you set foot on that isolated island to the second you step back out, there's this constant sense that you've gone somewhere you weren't really meant to be. Not just far away, but completely cut off. Other caves connect back to the world. They tie into quests, factions, or the land around them. Jungvild doesn't. It exists on its own, separate, self-contained, almost forgotten. And that's what makes it so effective, because the isolation isn't just about distance, it's about disconnection. From Skyrim, from people, from anything familiar. By the time you leave, it doesn't feel like you've just cleared another cave. It feels like you've returned from somewhere that was never fully a part of the world to begin with.